The wind carried the smell of rain and gunpowder that evening, as if the land itself knew death was near. Eli McGraw lay propped against a weathered oak, his breath shallow, his eyes fixed on the fading sun. His younger brother, Jonas, knelt beside him, the dust of 100 miles still clinging to his coat. Eli's voice was a rasp, but his words cut through the stillness like a knife. "Jonas, there's something I need you to do, something you ain't gonna understand, but you'll do it, 'cause you're my blood." Jonas swallowed hard. "Name it." Eli's gaze shifted past him, toward the shadow of a figure standing in the edge of the clearing. She was tall, impossibly tall, her head nearly brushing the low branches. Her long black hair caught the dying light, and her eyes were the color of storm clouds over the plains. "She's yours now," Eli whispered, "by my word and by the old ways." Jonas turned, his pulse quickening. The woman stepped forward, her boots silent on the earth. She looked down at him, her expression unreadable, and said in a voice deep and steady, "I'm your wife now." The words hit Jonas harder than any bullet. He didn't know her name. He didn't know her story. But something in her presence, something ancient, told him this was no ordinary woman. And as Eli's last breath left his body, the wind shifted, carrying with it the distant sound of drums. The fire crackled low in the pit, throwing long shadows across the clearing. Jonas sat on a fallen log, his hands wrapped around a tin cup of bitter coffee. Though he barely tasted it, the giant woman sat opposite him, silent, her face lit by the flicker of flame. She was unlike anyone Jonas had ever seen. Her frame was broad and powerful, yet her movements were measured, almost regal. Her skin bore the bronze warmth of the high plains, and faint white scars traced her forearms like the memory of battles long past. Around her neck hung a string of carved bone talismans, each etched with symbols Jonas didn't recognize. Finally he spoke. "I don't even know your name." Her eyes lifted to meet his, steady and unblinking. "Nokomis," she said, "daughter of the Thunder People." The name rolled through the air like distant thunder itself. Jonas had heard whispers of the Thunder People from old trappers and Lakota storytellers, a people said to walk between the world of men and the world of spirits, bound by ancient pacts older than the frontier itself. He wanted to ask more, but her gaze shifted toward the darkness beyond the firelight. Jonas followed it, and for a moment he thought he saw movement, a shadow slipping between the trees. Nokomis spoke again, her voice low. "Your brother saved my life. In return, I swore to protect his blood." "That is you now," Jonas frowned. "Protect me from what?" She didn't answer. Instead, she reached into a leather pouch at her side and drew out a small bundle wrapped in deerskin. She placed it in his hands. Inside was a silver amulet, tarnished with age, its surface engraved with the same strange markings as her talismans. "Keep this close," she said. "If you hear the drums again, do not run toward them." Do not answer their call. Jonas felt a chill crawl up his spine. "What happens if I do?" Her eyes darkened. "Then you will meet the ones who come for the debt your brother could not pay." The wind rose suddenly, carrying with it the faint, rhythmic thump of drums. Closer now than before. Nokomis stood in one fluid motion, towering over him, her hand resting on the hilt of a long, curved blade strapped to her back. "They've found us," she said, "and they will not wait for dawn." The night had a weight to it, a heavy, pressing stillness that made every sound feel sharper, closer. The fire between Jonas and Nokomis had burned down to embers, glowing like the last eyes of some dying beast. Beyond the circle of light, the prairie stretched into a black ocean, the grass whispering under the restless wind. Jonas could hear the drums now, not faint, not distant, but steady, deliberate, as if each beat was a footstep drawing nearer. They weren't the kind of drums he'd heard at frontier dances or tribal gatherings. These were slower, deeper, carrying a strange resonance that seemed to vibrate in his bones. Nokomis stood tall, her silhouette cutting against the stars. She didn't flinch at the sound. Instead, she closed her eyes and tilted her head slightly, as though listening for something beneath the rhythm. A hidden message Jonas couldn't hear. "They're not riding horses," she murmured. "They're walking. That means they want you to feel them coming." Jonas rose to his feet, his hand instinctively going to the colt at his hip. "Who are they?" She turned to him, her expression unreadable. "Debt collectors. But not the kind you've met before." The wind shifted and Jonas caught a scent. Damp earth, smoke, and something metallic, like blood left too long in the sun. His grip on the revolver tightened. Nokomis stepped closer, her height forcing him to tilt his head back slightly to meet her gaze. "If they reach you, they will speak your name. Do not answer, do not even breathe loud enough for them to hear. The amulet will hide you." For a time, Jonas swallowed hard. "And if it doesn't?" Her lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Then I kill them before they take you." The drums grew louder, and now Jonas could hear something else. A faint rattling, like bones knocking together. The sound came from multiple directions, circling them. Nokomis moved to the edge of the firelight, her hand resting on the hilt of her curved blade. The weapon caught a glint of moonlight, revealing strange etchings along its length, the same markings as the amulet. Jonas's mind raced. He thought of Eli, of his brother's final breath, of the way his eyes had shifted toward Nokomis with something between fear and trust. What had Eli gotten himself into? And why had he dragged Jonas into it with his dying words? The first shadow appeared between the trees, tall, thin, and swaying unnaturally, as if its joints bent in ways they shouldn't. Then another, and another. Jonas counted at least 6, their faces hidden beneath bone masks carved into grotesque shapes. The rattling grew louder. Jonas realized it wasn't coming from their hands. It was coming from inside them. One of the masked figures stepped forward, its head cocking to the side like a curious bird. When it spoke, the voice was low and hollow, as though echoing from a deep well. "Jonas McGraw." Jonas froze. Every instinct screamed to answer, to demand what they wanted, but Nokomis's earlier warning rang in his ears. He kept his mouth shut, his breath shallow. The figure tilted its head the other way, then took another step forward. The drums stopped. The silence that followed was worse. Nokomis moved then, fast, impossibly fast for her size. Her blade flashed, and the nearest figure's head rolled into the grass before its body collapsed like a sack of dry sticks. The others didn't flinch. "Run," she said without looking at Jonas. "And don't stop until the sun touches your face." Jonas hesitated for a fraction of a second, long enough to see the remaining figures spread out, their bone masks glinting in the moonlight, their movements slow but deliberate, like predators who knew the kill was inevitable. Then he ran. The prairie swallowed him whole, the grass whipping at his legs, the cold air burning his lungs. Behind him he could hear Nokomis's battle cry, a sound that was part human, part thunderclap, and the clash of steel against something that didn't sound like flesh. But over it all, faint and relentless, the drums began again. The prairie was a black sea under a sky thick with stars, each blade of grass whispering as Jonas tore through it. His boots pounded the earth, his breath ragged, the amulet thudding against his chest with every stride. The cold air sliced into his lungs, but he didn't dare slow down. Behind him, the drums were no longer steady. They were erratic now, like a heartbeat gone mad, sometimes close, sometimes far, as if the sound itself was hunting him. Somewhere in the darkness, Nokomis fought. He could hear her, the metallic ring of her blade, the guttural cries of her enemies, the sharp crack of bone. But there was something else in her voice too, something that didn't sound entirely human. It was deeper, older, like the voice of a storm rolling over the plains. Jonas's mind was a storm of its own. Every step brought questions crashing into him. Why had Eli bound himself to this woman? What debt could be so great that it followed a man beyond death? And why, in the name of all that was holy, did it now belong to Jonas? The ground dipped suddenly, and Jonas stumbled into a dry creek bed. He landed hard. The wind knocked from his chest. For a moment he lay there staring up at the sky, the Milky Way spilling across it like a river of light. He thought of Eli again, the way his brother had always been larger than life, the kind of man who could walk into a saloon and have the whole room listening before he'd even spoken. But Eli had also been a man who kept secrets. Jonas pushed himself up, his ears straining. The drums had stopped again. That was worse, much worse. A faint rattle came from the ridge above him. Slowly Jonas looked up. A figure stood there, silhouetted against the stars. Tall, thin, its limbs too long, its head cocked at an unnatural angle. The bone mask it wore caught the starlight, its hollow eyes fixed on him. Jonas's hand went to his Colt, but before he could draw, the figure spoke. "Jonas McGraw!" The voice was wrong. It was Eli's voice. Jonas froze. His brother's tone, his brother's cadence, even the slight rasp from years of whiskey and dust. But Eli was dead. He'd watched him die. The figure took a step down the slope, its movements jerky, like a puppet pulled by invisible strings. "You left me, little brother. You ran when I needed you most." Jonas's throat tightened. "You ain't him," he said, though his voice shook. The figure tilted its head the other way. "Come with me, Jonas. We can finish what I started, pay the debt together." Jonas's fingers brushed the amulet. It was warm now, almost hot, as if it knew the danger. He remembered Nokomis's warning. Do not answer. Do not even breathe loud enough for them to hear. He turned and scrambled up the opposite side of the creek bed, his boots slipping on loose dirt. The figure didn't follow. Not yet. But the rattling grew louder, joined by more footsteps, more shapes moving in the dark. Jonas crested the ridge and nearly collided with Nokomis. She was breathing hard, her blades slick with something black that steamed in the cold air. Her eyes scanned him quickly, then the darkness behind him. "They're trying to break you," she said. "They'll wear your brother's voice until you believe it's him." "That's how they take you," Jonas swallowed. "What are they?" She glanced over her shoulder. "Collectors of the thunder debt. Your brother made a bargain with the ones who live between storms. He asked for strength, for victory, for life when death was certain. They gave it to him. But the price was a wife from their bloodline. Me, and a service he never fulfilled. When he died, the debt passed to you." Jonas stared at her. I didn't agree to any of this. Her gaze was steady. Neither did I. The rattling was closer now, the bone-masked figures emerging from the grass like ghosts. Nokomis grabbed Jonas's arm and pulled him toward a cluster of low hills. We make it to the stone circle. They can't cross. It's old ground, sacred ground. They ran together, the land rising and falling beneath their feet. Jonas's legs burned, his chest ached, but he kept going. The figures followed, never running, never hurrying, but somehow never falling behind. The hills loomed ahead, their shapes black against the starlit sky. Jonas could see the faint outline of the stone circle. Massive slabs of weathered granite standing in a ring, their surfaces carved with symbols like those on Nokomis's blade. They were almost there when one of the figures appeared in front of them, stepping out from behind a boulder. It moved faster than Jonas thought possible, its long arms reaching for him. Nokomis shoved him aside and swung her blade in a wide arc. The figure's mask split in two, revealing nothing beneath but darkness, a darkness that seemed to pull at the edges of the world. Jonas stumbled into the circle, the amulet burning against his chest. Nokomis followed, her blade raised, her eyes scanning the shadows beyond the stones. The figures stopped at the edge of the circle. They didn't cross. They just stood there, swaying, their bone masks gleaming in the moonlight. The drums began again, slow and steady, as if promising they had all the time in the world. Nokomis lowered her blade slightly. They won't come in. Not tonight, but they'll wait. They always wait. Jonas looked at her, his chest still heaving. Then what do we do? She met his gaze, and for the first time he saw something in her eyes that wasn't just strength, it was fear. We find a way to pay the debt, or we make sure they can't collect it. The stone circle was silent except for the wind, which hissed softly through the grass like a warning whispered by the earth itself. Jonas stood inside its ancient boundary, his chest heaving, the amulet burning against his skin. Beyond the ring of granite, the bone-masked figures swayed in unison, their hollow eyes fixed on him. Nokomis paced the circle's edge, her blade still in hand, her gaze never leaving the enemy. The moonlight caught the sweat on her brow, the faint tremor in her fingers. She was strong, but Jonas could see it. The fight had cost her. "They'll wait until dawn," she said finally, her voice low. "When the sun rises, they'll vanish. But they'll come again the next night, and the next. Until the debt is paid," Jonas swallowed hard. "Then tell me how to pay it." She stopped pacing and looked at him, her eyes dark and unreadable. "The Thunder people don't want gold. They don't want land. They want what was promised, a life given freely in service to them. Your brother promised his own, but when they came to collect, he gave them mine instead. I was bound to him as wife, protector, and shield, but he broke the pact when he refused their final command." Jonas's mind reeled. What command? Her jaw tightened. They wanted him to kill a man who had done them wrong, but that man was your father. The words hit Jonas like a bullet. He staggered back, his breath catching. "Our father's been dead for years," Nokomis nodded, "because Eli refused. The Thunder people do not forgive refusal. They took him in battle, but the debt remained. And now?" She looked at him with something like sorrow. "It's yours." Jonas's hands curled into fists. "Then I'll give them nothing." Her gaze sharpened. "If you refuse, they'll take it anyway. They'll take you. And when they do, they'll bind your soul to them forever. You'll walk in their masks, speak in their voices, hunt for them until the end of days. The wind shifted and the drums began again, slow, deliberate, each beat echoing in Jonas's bones. The figures outside the circle straightened, their swaying stopping all at once. Nokomis stepped closer, her voice urgent now. There is one way to end it without giving yourself to them. But it will cost me everything. Jonas shook his head. No. She reached up and touched the amulet at his chest. This was mine before it was yours. It hides you from their sight, but only because it carries my life inside it. If I break it, the power will explode outward, enough to drive them back beyond the storm's edge. But when it's gone, so am I. Jonas's throat tightened. You'd die. Her lips curved into a faint smile. I was meant to die the day your brother saved me. Every day since has been borrowed. The drums grew louder, the figures stepping closer to the circle's edge. The air felt heavy, charged, as if lightning was about to strike. Jonas's mind raced. He thought of Eli, of his father, of the life he'd had before this night, a life that now felt impossibly far away. He thought of Nokomis, this towering, fierce, mysterious woman who had fought for him without hesitation. And he knew what he had to do. He grabbed her wrist. Then we do it together. Her eyes widened. Jonas! But he was already pulling the amulet from his neck. The heat of it seared his palm, but he didn't let go. If it's your life in here, then it's mine now too. We break it together, and whatever happens, happens to both of us. For a moment she just stared at him. Then slowly, she nodded. Very well. On my count, they stood side by side at the center of the circle, the bone-masked figures closing in, their rattling now a deafening roar. The sky above churned with black clouds, lightning flickering deep within them. 3, Nokomis said, her voice steady. 2. The nearest figure stepped into the circle, and the stones themselves groaned in protest. 1. They slammed the amulet to the ground. It shattered with a sound like a thunderclap, a blinding light erupting from it in all directions. The force knocked Jonas to his knees. The air ripped from his lungs. The bone-masked figures screamed, a sound that was not human, as the light tore through them, unraveling their shapes into smoke and shadow. The drums stopped. The wind died. When Jonas's vision cleared, the prairie was empty. The figures were gone. The sky was calm again, the moon shining down on the silent stones. He turned to Nokomis, but she was already fading, her form dissolving into motes of light that drifted upward, like fireflies. The debt is paid, she said softly. Live well, Jonas McGraw. And then she was gone. Jonas stood alone in the circle, the shards of the amulet at his feet. The night was quiet now, but he knew the story wasn't over. Somewhere out there, the Thunder people still walked between storms. And if they ever came again, he'd be ready. He picked up his brother's Colt, holstered it, and stepped out of the circle into the open prairie. The first light of dawn was breaking on the horizon, painting the grass in gold. Jonas McGraw rode toward it, the wind at his back, the memory of a giant woman at his side.